Hello everyone, my name is Kevin Wamsley, President at Nipissing University. Today's episode is diving deep into Nipissing University workings. We think of an undergraduate university as a place where we have classes, where students attend, but just as important are some of the other things that go on at the university which lead to what's taught in our classrooms, and that's research. Today we're going into the Owl's Nest, the Alumni Lounge, to meet our special guest from the Faculty of Arts and Science. Very excited to welcome our guest today, Professor Susan Srigley. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Kevin.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Great. Well, we're going to begin our conversation about some very important work that you're doing. Let's start with your areas of expertise. How were you trained?
I was trained in religious studies, and I did my doctoral dissertation on Flannery O'Connor, who's an American novelist, and so I focused in the study of religion, ethics, and literature.
So with your area of expertise, is it recently that you've gotten into a particular subject matter that you're interested in?
I have indeed. I've started teaching courses in death education and death awareness, and it's been really transformative for me, for my research, and for my teaching, and so it's been a shift, but a good one. Well,
this sounds like something that everyone is interested in because I think that it affects everyone.
100% chance
So
it's
tell me about death education. What is it? Why do you study it?
I found that as I was teaching it, the students were really engaged and they loved learning about death studies and all the different elements of death education. And so I started developing more courses and their popularity grew. Students started telling me that they thought that these courses should be mandatory. Everyone should take a course in death ed. And I think it was because they experienced death in their lives. They experienced death, but they also experienced the fear of death. And I think that was a really important part of the equation here.
You probably have students in your classes from all different faculties, all different departments. It affects everyone.
Yeah.
And what you're doing in the classroom will change people's outlook on life and on death, which will have an impact on their jobs, which will have an impact on their families and their lives going forward. Are there any specific examples where students have had an experience in their class where you can identify that it has changed who they are?
What I discovered is that death education is something that all of us need to think about and know about in whatever kind of career or discipline, and so when I teach a course on death and social justice. So we look at end-of-life care and some of the barriers or obstacles to good end-of-life care. So what does it mean to be unhoused and at the end of your life? What does it mean to face racism at the end of life or homophobia? And I showed the students a video of a couple who were documenting their end-of-life journey. And the students watched it, and I think they were completely, sort of caught up in this, because for most of them, they'd never seen anyone dying or going through the dying process, including the nurses. And the nurses said to me after that class, this should be required watching for all nurses so that we can become more familiar with it and so that we can understand what it means for families who are going through it, so that our own anxieties are not feeding into the situation and we can be a more stabilizing presence.
So that what we're doing is actually, we're assisting the person, we're centralizing the person who is dying and not thinking about our own issues as we're going through that.
That's right. So death education begins with your own relationship to death.
So then let me ask you, through all of this research and all of the hours that you spent talking to students about death in the classroom, how has it changed you?
I think it's made me appreciate life more. I think it's helped me to see the ways in which whatever time we have is limited, and I think that it's made me more empathic to others, to my students, to their fears and their anxieties, because this is what's come to the forefront for me, is that I've seen the ways in which a death-denying culture has really detrimental effects on everyone, but particularly on young people. And they are at a transformative period in their lives when they're at university, and they're embarking on new careers and new lives and independence. And I think that some of those anxieties about death are, sort of improved when they have the place to talk about them.
So the traditional venue for imparting knowledge and learning about issues is in the classroom, but increasingly social media is becoming more and more important, and I know that because I follow your social media accounts. So tell me about what you do on social media.
Sure. Well, I noticed that too, and increasingly I was incorporating assignments like podcast assignments where the students were learning about things through the podcast medium, and they tended to prefer that. They could listen to it driving in the car, they could listen to it walking to school, whatever it was. So I realized that as I got older, I was less connected to my students by the traditional means. So I decided to set up a Instagram account that is focused on death teaching, death education, death awareness, called Death Ambassadors. And the reason I called it Death Ambassadors is because when my students take a course, at the end of a death course, I tell them that they have now become a death ambassador because they have understood, they have studied death education, they've studied the death positive movement, and they can now be part of the change in our culture to talk about death and dying. And this is what we need. The only way we're going to overcome death denial is to have conversations about it. There might be some awkward ones, but in the end, I think that they're game to do it.
So some very important points here by Professor Srigley, transforming people's lives at a particular time and change in people's lives. This is undergraduate education at its finest in research and in the classroom. Thank you very much, Susan, for joining us today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
This is your Nipissing University.